Well, now on to what's making the news elsewhere. And having scoured the highways and byways of newspapers and websites, I'm pleased to say we can welcome back again former BBC Wales journalist Stuart Hughes, senior producer of the BBC's World Affairs unit. Good morning, Stuart.
Good morning, Vaughan. Happy Easter.
And to you, and joining us as well, Betsan Powys, who in a former life is political editor of BBC Wales. Bore da, Betsan.
Bore da, Vaughan.
Maybe you'd like to kick off, Betsan.
Okay, well, there seemed to me to be, I know there's an awful lot about coronavirus and you'd expect very little else really, but three thrusts. So the papers are looking at how Boris Johnson's health is doing, and a lot of sort of Easter language around, ministers praying for him, how he's now euphoric, now he's better. He is risen, apparently, one minister told the family when they were told that Boris Johnson was better and out of intensive care. Then you've got a really strange alliance of papers looking at weaknesses in the NHS. Front page of the Telegraph, NHS on brink of running out of gowns to protect workers in the NHS. And the Sunday Mirror saying NHS running out of drugs for the sickest patients. So that's a pretty unlikely and striking alliance, I suppose, putting pressure on the government over its handling of the crisis. But perhaps of most interest to me, as you might expect, is a sort of political look at all of this. And the hawks and the doves is a story that seems to me to be coming through of the ministers who, the doves, led by Chief Dove, I think Matt Hancock, who's concerned about lifting the lockdown, as you might imagine, is putting health first. And then the hawks, Rishi Sunak, Priti Patel, who are saying, look, the lockdown is doing more damage to the economy than the virus could possibly do. So we need to be looking now at how we get out of all of this. And really, as you might expect from Peter Hitchens in his column in the Mail, not a dove, definitely a hawk, because he's been all along in all of this. And he's comparing Matt Hancock, the health secretary, to his headmaster, as he remembers him as a boy in his boarding school, and says, here you have another petulant would-be despot, and that he needs to calm down. And Hitchens writes that, the number of deaths, it's regrettable, but not gigantic, and that it doesn't justify this level of intrusion and of lockdown. So that's where the debate sort of is.
I do find that fascinating, and that debate, of course, is taking place in countries other than the UK as well. Stuart, what have you seen?
Interesting to see how the papers are looking at technology and the way that technology could be used in getting us out of this coronavirus crisis, because, of course, even the less technologically savvy amongst us have had to embrace platforms. Well, are you up to speed with Zoom now and FaceTime and Skype?
Just about.
Many of us over the last 3 weeks or so have had to embrace these new technologies to stay in touch with family and friends or with work colleagues during the lockdown. The Sunday Times has got a couple of stories looking at the use of technology. On its front page, it says that ministers have ordered the creation of a mobile app that the government hopes will help end the coronavirus lockdown. It says the system will use Bluetooth to alert those who download the app if they've been in proximity with someone who's tested positive for COVID-19. And one idea under consideration would mean that you could be told that you can resume your normal work and home life if you install the app on your phones. And I suppose the idea of downloading an app in return for being allowed more freedom may seem appealing, but it does come with potential privacy risks, and those are picked up by the former MI5 chief, Jonathan Evans, also in the Sunday Times. And he compares the search for a way out of this crisis to the debate we had after 9/11, when the public looked to the government to use technology to help keep them safe. But he warns that combing big data for clues of how we can get out of coronavirus would involve widespread intrusion. And he says people may consider the kind of surveillance needed to keep COVID-19 at bay a price worth paying, but he warns that public confidence will be retained only if controls and accountability are also in place.
That's interesting, because Betsan, that was one of the stories you picked up on as well, wasn't it? And we do know that after 9/11 we accepted all sorts of things that are still with us at airports and so on. That, when the ratchet turns, it tends to stay turned.
It does, and people will accept far greater intrusion during a large crisis because, as you said, they're looking to the government to make things better. But Lord Evans says bluntly, this would be a severe intrusion into personal privacy, and the only way for the government to get it through is to come clean. And after 9/11, not everything got through. The Parliament has not allowed everything the government wanted to track terrorists along the years. So he's saying you need openness, you need transparency, oversight, accountability, because without that you get into pretty deep waters pretty quickly. But that's quite an incentive, isn't it? That if you download the app, you could go back to work, and start earning some more money. Carrot and stick in one there, I'd say.
Stuart, what else have you seen?
A lot of questions about when will the lockdown end, the question we're all asking. What's the direction of travel that will allow us to resume some semblance of normality? Is it an app, as the Sunday Times suggests? The former Home Secretary, Lord Blunkett's written in the Mail on Sunday, he says, people need to have hope. They need to know there is an end point. And Boris Johnson said at the start of this crisis, I need to level with the British public. And that's levelling with the British public is something that a number of the papers pick up on. The Sunday Times believes the government isn't levelling with us sufficiently. In its leader, it says there's been a lack of clarity from the government about the way forward, and a roadmap out of this lockdown is needed. But writing in the Observer, Andrew Rawnsley warns there's a danger in dreaming, as we're all dreaming, that there is a quick and easy recipe, an easy escape from the lockdown. And he highlights what he calls the lives versus livelihoods dilemma. How do we weigh up the impact that this lockdown is having on our daily lives and having on the economy against the raw cost in human lives if the lockdown is lifted too early? And he quotes one senior government advisor who warns to suddenly switch from we've got it all under control to release all measures would be a terrible mistake. So a lot of questions raised in the Sunday papers about how do we find a way out, and what should the government be telling us, and which direction that should they be pointing us in. Not a lot of answers yet, though.
I think all questions, no answers yet. Betsan, I was saying to Leslie Griffiths earlier that we haven't had the nightmare we feared in Wales over this weekend, with thousands of people heading for the beaches or crossing the borders, and that gets some attention as well.
It does. No, we haven't, and that generally people have behaved well. There have been lots of stories where individuals haven't. And there's a story in the Wales on Sunday or Wales Online today from Dyfed Powys, who've been patrolling their area, looking out for people who are travelling alone, people who are travelling from outside of the area. So talk again about checking where you're from and intrusion and so on, and the debate around that. But they've mentioned two cars that had travelled 300 miles between them. So one was travelling to Ireland to collect a dog, and having been stopped and turned round, the driver apparently admitted that he was probably chancing his luck a bit. And then another 90-mile journey, and they could tell it had been a 90-mile journey. When asked what it was, the driver said he was going to collect rice from a friend. So I'm not sure how that went down with the Powys police yesterday. But the most read, I noticed, incidentally, on Wales Online, not that story. It was, well, number one, the National Lottery results, and number two, a video of a seagull swallowing a rabbit whole. So it might be that people are just fed up and looking for something else, anything but possibly coronavirus.
The seagull swallowing. I'll look it up when I go home, I think.
You must.
Sounds like a high spot of the day these days. What else have you seen, Stuart?
A story that I would call a toast dropper. The kind of story that makes you say, really, over your morning breakfast. And that comes in the Mail on Sunday. And it's about one person who certainly seemed to make the most of his own lockdown, a different form of lockdown to the one we're going through at the moment. And that's the WikiLeaks founder, Julian Assange. According to the Mail on Sunday, Julian Assange secretly fathered two sons while holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy. Gabriel, aged 2, and his 1-year-old brother Max were conceived while their father was hiding out to avoid extradition to America, where he faces espionage charges. The Mail on Sunday reports that the mother of the two boys is a 37-year-old South African-born lawyer called Stella Morris, who fell in love with Julian Assange 5 years ago while working on his legal case. And the Mail reports that they've been engaged since 2017. Technology being used once again in this case. Assange watched both children being born via live video link, according to the Mail on Sunday, and had also met Gabriel when he was smuggled into the embassy. Slightly less savoury detail in the Mail on Sunday is that Mr. Assange and Miss Morris believe the American intelligence agencies tried to steal Gabriel's DNA from a nappy after becoming suspicious that Assange was his father. I do pity the intelligence officer who was assigned to carry out that particular task.
Yes, that was a job and a half, wasn't it, Betsan?
Well, I've come across a new breed that I didn't know about before. Well, I knew they existed, but I didn't know they have a name. But they have. They are the mammals, and they are middle-aged men in lycra. And these are this is the breed that appeared during the coronavirus lockdown. And the story here is, and it's in the Times, that the mammals have really hit the road during the coronavirus crisis, and we're supposed to be locked down. Well, it's not clear, is it, how much exercise we're allowed. Michael Gove talked about walking maybe for an hour or so, cycling half an hour to an hour. But apparently Strava, we've talked a lot about technology and apps today, and here we are again. It's an app you download to your phone to track your performance in terms of cycling or running and so on. And they have a challenge going on at the moment to cycle 777 miles in a month. And the leader on the leaderboard on Strava at the moment is from Llanidloes in Powys. And he has spent 47 hours in the saddle. He's burned 17,000 calories. He's volunteered this information, I think. But the question is, during the virus, and the thrust of the story is to say, hang on a minute, exercising seems to have shot up and is now the time to be setting challenges for long cycle rides. But I noticed that one of the first to comment was Dominic Cummings, first thing this morning. Whether it is the Dominic Cummings, I don't know, but certainly the name was Dominic Cummings, and we know he's an ardent cyclist, and he's saying, hang on, Times, come on, Sunday Times. You've got two articles saying that medics are telling people to keep healthy, to keep exercising, and now you're knocking cyclists for exercising. And I also noticed yesterday there was a video from Geraint Thomas doing the rounds, the cyclist, lives in Cardiff, of course, he's here now.
Who does look good in lycra, we have to say. Not many people can carry it off, but I think Geraint can.
And I'm not sure he's middle-aged yet, either, is he? But he's a youngish man still in his lycra. But he's going to be cycling, no doubt, hundreds of miles very, very swiftly. But he's doing it in his garage. So I suppose the question for the man from Llanidloes is whether he's in his garage or cycling the roads, and whether that is an issue. And the real big debate going on in the comments, set off by Dominic Cummings.
Stuart.
Yeah, I must admit, I've been going out cycling, not using one of the apps, but with my son, and I did appear in the kitchen the other day in cycling shorts, and instantly, understandably so, became a laughing stock in my own home. At the sight of a 48-year-old man wearing cycling shorts, I am the very embodiment of a mammal. So if that's all a little bit too strenuous for you, there is another suggestion of how you could be filling your hours of lockdown in the Observer, which reports that after vinyl and Polaroids, millennials are now falling for stamp collecting.
What? That's retro, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. According to the Observer, it was once a byword for boring, but it seems stamp collecting is finding a new, younger audience, despite the fact that many of the hobbyists have probably never posted a letter in their lives. Yes, you've heard it here first. Philately is the new black. It's gaining popularity among millennials, according to the Observer, many of whom see the creative pursuit as an escape from their screen-based lives. But on one hand, it says it's an escape from your screen-based lives, but on the other hand, the Observer quotes a woman who runs the Philatelic, is that, if I pronounce that right?
I think
Philatelic,
so, yeah.
Probably, Traders Society, who says, philately is tangible, it's relaxing and unplugged, but it's also very Instagrammable. So if you suddenly find a millennial near you getting into stamp collecting, it could be that they're just doing it for the gram.
Oh, I think we have time for one more story, Betsan.
Well, I noticed in the Telegraph that the new makeup for the coronavirus look is the no makeup. So you're supposed to go for bare-faced chic. Again, we're back with Instagram, no doubt. You have to have a dewy complexion, though, and a few pops of colour. That's the look that's acceptable during the lockdown. And I've realised that I've very naturally this morning succeeded in the no makeup look. Although dewy complexion and pops of colour, I'm afraid we'll have to wait until a lot later.
Thank you both. Good face for the wireless. You can listen again to this programme on BBC Sounds, the app for music, radio and podcasts. If you want advance notice of our guests and subjects, follow @Wales Politics on Twitter. This has been Sunday Supplement. After the news, all things considered. Baradachi.